Wasabi guys, I think it's about time we go back to Amonkhet and we see what exactly the impact for Commander has been. I'm going to be doing a top 10 list of the best cards from Amonkhet, and it's going to be in order what I feel is the best from this set. Obviously some of it's going to be obviously more biased. I have certain opinions about cards, some I hate, some I obviously love more than others. Before we get to the actual top 10, I'll go over some honorable mentions or dishonorable, however you choose to view them. I just felt that these cards, while some might have been in consideration, some people think that they're good, some people don't. I'll set the record straight here. Gideon and Nissa, both of these planeswalkers, they never really seemed too overwhelmingly powerful. Their ults are rather tame. They don't do enough. They're more standard angled, and even then they're not all that powerful in standard. Their abilities are just pretty small scaled, and if I had to say, which one was better, I would say Nissa, just because, quite frankly, Gideon has always been more of a standard focused planeswalker, whereas Nissa's obviously more interesting in terms of the colors and the X mana cost, yeah. But she doesn't do anything interesting beyond the first two abilities. Her ult is very plain. Her plus is okay, more dependent on how many loyalty counters that she has, so limited and such an awkward spot here. The planeswalkers weren't too impressive. Then we have Aven Mind Sensor, which for obvious reasons isn't going to be on this list, but has seen a ton of play in Commander ever since its initial release in Future Sight, however, already been printed. Not going to go over that again. Harsh Mentor is a good card, but I feel it's more angled towards modern. It has obvious purposes and reasons for existing in that format. It just doesn't do enough in Commander. It's so small scaled. Then we have Bounty of Luxa, would be on this list and was in consideration, just too slow and not effective enough, and not able to abuse those counters on it. It's not, initially it looked like it was going to be something interesting, but just seemed rather dull and too slow to get going. And then we have Samut, Voice of Dissent, interesting legendary creature. Just the end result for why she didn't end up on the list was because she didn't really do anything specific. She was just more just a Naya good stuff commander. Doesn't really pilot humans all that well, other than the fact that she is a human. There's a better option for Naya creatures. You have Maya the Anima, so what's the point of playing her? Probably going to play her in one of those decks anyway. There's better options in Naya colors. Unfortunately, she's not a terrible commander, but she just doesn't make this list. Then we have the 5 gods of Amonkhet here, all of which are relatively useless in Commander compared to their many superiors. In particular, when we talk about ones that would be close to making the cut, we're thinking of Bantu and maybe Ronus. Ronus just is a good body creature, indestructible. That's most likely going to be a creature, but indestructible creatures, unless they have evasion or some epic ability like say Avacyn and making your other creatures indestructible or stuff like that, they don't tend to see too much play. They're just solid body creatures that don't get too big. Bantu, there's better sack outlets on creatures in this format. We have Prosh, we have Yaheni, we have Gave Guru of Spores. There are just so many better sack outlets that are able to trigger life gain, life loss abilities from Blood Artist and Falcon Wrath Nobles that it just doesn't seem to be enough. So the gods, they just don't do it for me. So let's get on to the actual list. Number 10, Throne of the God Pharaoh. Very underrated and almost a surprise how this card has not seen play in Legacy, maybe even Modern. But the fact that at the end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. And you don't have to be playing a super aggressive token build. You could be playing elves, you could be playing wizard, tribal. You could be playing any sort of strategy where you can manipulate whether or not your creatures are tapped or untapped. You don't have to be attacking. And there are ways to just absolutely just abuse this. And it's only 2 mana. It's a 2 mana artifact. It's not that demanding, and you don't have to invest all that much into this card and that strategy, that trying to cheat a win out. Very easy. Just surprised how this hasn't caught on yet in Commander, where it's even easier to abuse this type of ability. Number 9 is Hepatra, Vizier of Poisons. Out of all the legendaries, she is the clear-cut favorite because she has a very specific strategy around the -1/-1 counters to where it's so easy to build around her. The others, very narrow, are just not specific enough, and Hepatra's kind of that middle ground where there's a lot of different things you can do in Golgari colors that synergize with counters, and Wither, in fact, just very easy ways to do whatever you want with those type of abilities. Number 8 is Liliana, Death's Majesty, the only Planeswalker on this list. The other two just don't do enough. I feel with Liliana, you know what you're getting. Pretty much one of the only Planeswalkers that synergize well with zombies. She is 5 mana, she's mono black, but every single one of her abilities just synergize well with zombies, and it's just a shame. You wish you had that type of synergy with other Planeswalkers. Number 7 is As Foretold. I feel a little bit overrated. More people tend to say this card is just, broken. It gets to the point where it's no longer a decent advantage, and suddenly the counters get out of control, and you're not going to be able to cast anything for free anymore. So I still have it on this list because it is very good, and even the cards that you do get to cast for free, being able to cast anything for free is always nice. So it is on this list at number 7. Number 6 is Manglehorn. Now, it's not Rex Sage in versatility, even though it just destroys an artifact upon ETB. The fact that it has your opponent's artifacts enter the battlefield tapped is great. It has that versatility there. It has that usefulness, kind of like a half of blind obedience ability there. Not really something you see too often in green. It usually either destroys artifacts, it doesn't usually disrupt them. So that's pretty cool. Number 5, Pull from Tomorrow. We all know Blue Sun Zenith, very different. It's only 2 blue and X, the only other cost being you have to discard a card after you draw them. I think personally it's better. I would rather discard a card than have to pay an additional blue, if that makes sense to anybody. You get that X, and you can put more into X because you don't have to pay an additional blue. There are cards like Prosperity that allow you to pay even more into X. The only drawback is you're also giving that card draw to your opponent. So let's put it that way. For only paying 1 more blue, you're basically getting a Prosperity that's only for you, and you have to discard a card. Not bad. I know I just kind of went in all these different angles and tried to compare Pull from Tomorrow to so many different cards, but, it is what it is. I think it's a great card, and blue's just very good for card draw and commander. Number 4, Cycling Dual Lands, all of them. The 5 Cycling Dual Lands. I think that it's always good to have 2 different land types because we do have fetch lands in this format, and the fact that they also give you the option of cycling is also awesome. We already have cycling lands though, so they would be higher if they didn't come into play tap. It's the only drawback here, but other than that, the fact that you have something that you can search early on, you can always search these and have them tapped, especially if you don't need the mana early on. So many people don't do this, and that's why they don't win, because they don't strategize better. Number 3, Cascading Cataracts. If you have a ton of colorless mana and you have storm decks, if you have ways of just getting tons of colorless mana, whether it's infinite or not, being able to then tap your Cascading Cataracts and produce 5 colored mana of any combination, that's mana fixing. Mana fixing is always going to have a very solid spot on my list, especially, as well as a very good place in Commander. Number 2 is Vizier of the Menagerie. Very awesome, very much like Oracle of Moldiah, but for creatures. Another benefit is the fact that you can spend any mana of any color to cast a creature spell. That type of mana fixing, that versatility, is so underrated in Commander, and even though it's just like a $5 card right now, its value is it's always going to be there for creature decks. It's an auto include for decks like Animar, My LV Anima, just any creature-based deck in general. It's always going to have that need to speed up and always kind of look forward and look ahead, because you're not always going to have the best card draw. Having something that can manipulate the top card of your library like that is always going to be good. Number 1, Anointed Procession. The main reason why this is at number 1 is because we already know the impact in the value of cards that do this exact same thing. We have a card that's exactly like this in Parallel Lives, and while it's not expensive like Doubling Season, it does 1/2 of what Doubling Season does. It doesn't do the +1/+1 counter thing, but the fact that you get a token doubler in mono white means that you have another advantage if you wanted to go that route and play something like Chemball and just make a ton of cat tokens. Also, you're obviously going to put this in a deck like Grist the Redeemed or Gave Guru of Spores. It's an auto include, and before you even had to playtest with it, you already knew that. Same cannot be said for a lot of the other cards on this list. It was more of preference, or certain flavor or certain mechanics that you weren't sure of yet. With this card, you basically already knew what it was going to do, the only difference being it's the white version of Parallel Lives. By looking at it, that you can just say that you already know that it's going to be good, because Parallel Lives is an amazing card, and the fact that it's in white, so many of these white decks already play Parallel Lives. Having this in there just gives you another awesome ability that so many decks are going to want to use. So the fact that this is number 1 shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's just so awesome. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for my list. Remember, if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you enjoy this video, please like, share it. Signing off. Peace. Void Mage Gamer.